As I mentioned, it's our privilege to have a guest speaker tonight. Brian Hall's with us. I've known Brian for a few years. I had the good fortune to perform the ceremony when his son Isaac married Olivia McMillan a couple of years ago. So known him since then. Brian lives in Berea, right? Has a lovely wife Donna and 3 children. They worship at the Richmond Church of Christ, and he has recently gone full-time to work in this work, the Living Water 414 in Guyana, which he'll tell you much more about. I met a fellow that he works with, David Pear, is it pronounced Pear? Pear, who's been doing this work for a couple years. I met David a couple years ago. We talked about it then, and I saw David at CYC and said, we'd love for one of you to come up here and tell us a little bit about the work, and just so we can learn more about what's going on in Guyana. So, Brian, if you want to take it from here.
All right, let's see if this thing works. Well, anyway.
That should work.
Jesus never had to use PowerPoint, so it's okay. Hey, there it went.
It was on the wrong side there.
Oh, okay. By the way, where are you from? Africa. South Africa? Okay. I love your accent. I'm just from Kentucky, so we talk like this right here. But anyway, one of the reasons why I like going to Guyana is because they speak English. And if you don't know where Guyana is, it's the top of South America. You can follow those lines and see where I fly out of Lexington for some reason, sometimes in Cincinnati. And we get down there. It's about a half a day's trip, so it's not too far. Some facts. Guyana means the land of many waters. There's also French Guyana, which they pronounce that way. All of those countries at the top of South America used to be called Guyana. It is near the equator, so the temperature is always about 90 degrees in the upper 80s. It's a former British colony. I am actually older than the country of Guyana by 1 year. It gained its independence in 1966. It's about the size of Great Britain, if that gives you an idea of the size of the country. Its official language is English. It's the only official language that's English in South America. It's about 90% of the people. You see where that big river delta is, the Essequibo River dumps in? Just to the right of that is Georgetown, the capital. In about a 40-mile square area is where 90% of the population lives. And that's where all of the missionaries have gone for years, up until about 20 years ago. There are 9 different Amerindian tribes. The locals there are called Amerindians. We would say Native Americans here in America. The average lifespan is about 66 because they don't have as good a health care system as we have. How many people here can live on $150 a month for your whole family? I mean, your eating out budget personally for yourself is probably more than that in a month. That is about what they live on there in American dollars. Most people live off of the land. They hunt and fish and do odd jobs and things like that. If you go out to eat and you spend $10,000, that sounds like a lot, but divide that by 200, it's about $5 is what it costs. There are some of the animals that you will see. You see the caiman up there. Those aren't as big as crocodiles. They're only like 4 to 8 feet big. But can you imagine crossing a river with your children, going to church services with things like that in the water? People do that there. And you all, like me, sometimes you think you got a sniffle, you don't show up to worship. Or if the air conditioner's not working, you don't come. The jaguar is a protected animal. The only way that you can kill it is if it's trying to kill you. So I don't know how they would prove that. But the kanji pheasant is the national bird. The jaguar is the national animal. An anteater is an interesting thing. I have not yet seen one. I've been on 3 trips, but I haven't seen one in person yet. You've heard of a sloth, piranha. I got to eat one of those the last trip I was there. They serve it just like that, the head and the teeth and everything, and you just dig into it and eat what you want. They don't fillet anything there for some reason. I haven't seen an anaconda yet. Giant river otters are big, but they're cute. Couture Falls is about 4 times higher than Niagara Falls. It's the largest single drop waterfalls in the world. Others have multiple drops. And then Mount Roraima is the tri-border between Venezuela, Brazil, and Guyana. And they have a little bit of tourism in Guyana, and that's where people go, these ecotourism places like that. That isn't where we go. We go to places in the interior, away from the capital of Georgetown. A lot of places do not have any electricity, which of course means they don't have refrigerators or computers or internet, anything like that. But when you go there, one of the things that you don't notice at first, it's just something's different. I'm not sure what it is. People aren't looking at their phones. Everybody's not looking down like here in America. So they do have some cell phones, but there's very few towers, and they don't usually have smartphones. And they're poor by our standards in the United States, but they're very content people. I liken it to maybe how the United States was 100 years ago. Everybody kind of lived off the land. Everybody was kind of similar in their amount of possessions that they had, things like that. That's typical of some of the houses. The one on the lower left is being constructed. These are also typical houses, depending on what part of the country you're in, and they do have a rainy season. Otherwise, they don't have a season. We were down there in December and said that we'd be back in the spring. And one of them raised their hand and said, "When's that?" And we said, well, they said, "Is it before or after the rainy season?" And we said, well, it's, like February, March. And they said, "Okay, well, just tell us what month then," because they don't have different seasons. They're near the equator, and so the sunrise and sunset's always the same. The weather is always the same. It's not like here. More houses. Some are brick or block or wood. There's a fellow making mud bricks there. That's an inside of the house on the upper right. Gives you an idea of what the roof looks like from the inside. And then those little sheets are dividers for the rooms. It doesn't have any rooms. They just divide it that way. And the lower right, you can see that they're cooking over an open flame there on the inside. And to re-roof the roof on the left, the old roof is the flat gray part, and then the new roof is what they're putting on. And that's palm leaves, and it'll eventually lay down. And it's supposed to last as many as 10 years, and there's no thatch or anything like that. It's just leaves. The houses aren't really decorated on the inside. They just don't have extra stuff, like clocks and calendars and, artwork prints or anything like we're used to. Certainly no wall televisions. Jerry O. Davidson and his wife Frances were the first missionaries to go to deep in the interior of Guyana. Everyone had concentrated along the coast. They had been missionaries in Trinidad, and they established about 30 congregations in about a 19-year period. And I got to wondering, the Apostle Paul, we think of as a great missionary. Well, scholars say he only established between 14 and 20, they're guessing, that they know of on his missionary journey. So they outdid the Apostle Paul, so I give them a lot of reverence. Jerry's goal is the Lord's church in every village and a Bible in every hut. There are about 150 interior villages, and we're in about 30 of them right now, so we've got a lot more to do. This is Brother Jerry and David Pear, who Darrell mentioned. David actually started going to Guyana about 10 years ago, but full-time about 5 years ago. And Brother Jerry had to retire recently due to Parkinson's. And so Brother David is carrying on the work. And my wife and I, about 10 months ago, decided that I would leave my marketing job in the medical field and take a pretty good pay cut to be a missionary. But it's very rewarding, and I love it. And I've been down there 5 out of the last 8 months. Not the whole parts of the months, but a lot. And I've really gotten to know the people, and I love them. Here are the congregations. It's a little hard, maybe. No, that looks really good up there. The stars are the places that we go. Some are closer to the coast, but mostly they're deep in the interior, some close down to Brazil. And some of them have local Amerindian names, and others have English names. So how do you get there? Well, you go on a small plane. That's a 14-seater. Some of you may not like that. I don't know. Darrell mentioned the wedding that he performed. My daughter-in-law's father is a pilot, and he trains pilots, but it's on the big ones, not these little ones like that. You feel every bump on those. And so sometimes you take a boat because they don't have much infrastructure as far as roads and bridges, and so the river is the road, so to speak. You might take a motorcycle. That's me and Brother Elroy going over to Bonfim, Brazil. We do have one congregation right across the border that speaks English, and so we were going over there. We rent an army truck and fill it full. You got to take everything with you when you go. We sleep sometimes in hammocks, sometimes in tents. I am mosquito food, so I like mosquito nets when I have a chance. Other people aren't bothered by those. If you're really lucky, like in the lower right, that is a village house that I think maybe 8 people could stay there. Our team is usually a lot larger than that, so other people stay in tents. If you are a lady and you'd like to have electricity and a curling iron and a blow dryer and a bathroom and stuff, it's probably not for you, because that's the shower there on the left. You pull the bucket, out of the well, you pull the bucket up, and then you douse that over you and use some soap. That's how that works. How many people in here grew up without electricity, by the way? Anybody? Nobody? Well, this is the first place. Y'all are young and affluent. I tell you, that's good. Usually there's 3 or 4 or 5 or something that, the older folks that grew up without that. But how many without telephone, maybe? Nobody? Wow. All right. The kids are like, there was life before telephones? I don't know. But in Guyana, you don't have that. That's an outhouse on the left. They call it a latrine. There's the lady, the mother, the preacher's wife, getting water out of the well. It was about maybe 30 feet deep. And I volunteered to help with that. And so you try to pull up several buckets of water that far and leaning over like that, it really got to me. I felt like a wimp because these, older ladies in their 60s and 70s were doing it with no trouble whatsoever. That is the bathing house there on the right. It's sort of like that other place I showed you. It's just bigger. But you have to haul it up from the well and then use the water. So it's a different culture than what we're used to, but it's the same God, and that's why we go. Being in Kentucky, you may see some oxen or horse or mules and things pulling wagons, but some other places you may not see that. Oh, does anybody here have a pet iguana? No? Okay. No? Good. All right. Because over there, they're not pets. They're food. And you see the little boy holding an iguana, and it's upside down, but they just kind of take it and chop it up like a hot dog. And they don't take the bone out or the skin off. And so when you're eating a bite, like I am on the lower right, you can tell exactly what part of the iguana it is, because you could piece it all back together if you wanted to. That's just the way they do it. They don't fillet anything or take the bones out. Okay, that is Bill and Ravita. He's one of the preachers and his wife. And when you go down there, obviously I'm fat. That's another big difference. They don't go gray. They stay black-headed for some reason. And they don't sweat. The Lord blessed them with that. And they're obviously not fat because they work and walk and, don't eat so much and don't eat all the fat stuff. Like I stopped at Taco Bell on the way up here. I already had lunch. And then I had a second lunch, whatever that is. What is it Taco Bell used to say, the 4th meal or something? Yeah, that's what I had today. So advertising and marketing works. Anyway, down there, that's fresh. The coconuts were right off the tree. You chop off the top to where you get down to a hole. You drink the milk out. And then you further chop it off to where you can get the meat. And they'll chop off a part of the outside of the shell to make sort of a scoop. And that's how you get the meat out of it. Ravita is making bread out of cassava. Cassava is a root, sort of like a potato, but it's toxic. It's got some juices in there that you have to squeeze out. Y'all know those Chinese finger things, what I'm talking about? You stick one in both ends. They make big things like that and put the cassava in there and squeeze to get all of the bad juice out of it before they make the bread. And in the lower left, that is their kitchen. You can see right through the walls. There's no insulation or anything like that. It's really just to keep, the animals out and the rain off. That's what structures are for. They do have a nice house. They have an upper floor, though. But anyway, in her kitchen was hanging upside down this sort of a barbed plant thing, dried. And I thought, that doesn't look very edible. And I asked what it was. It turns out that those barbs on there keep the bats out, because the bats can't see very well, and it's kind of spindly, and they'll fly into it, and it'll cut them, and then they'll stay out of her kitchen. That's not something we have to deal with, but that's an ingenious way of keeping bats out of your kitchen. There's a little monkey on my shoulder trying to get my coconut. I did not know this, but in Guyana, they have a continual growing season. Here we have a spring, you plant and then you harvest in the fall. There they'll get 2 or 3 crops because it's always good weather. I didn't realize that particular type of coconut grows. You can see little ones and medium-sized ones and big ones. It just continually grows. There is no harvesting time for it. You just wait till it gets ready. The guy on the right with the helmet, he was selling the bananas. I think he was like on a motorcycle or a moped or something, but a lot of times they'll just walk for miles carrying things to sell. The lower left is fish. They just chopped it down the middle, hung it over a fence. This was when we had a seminar in December. It cooked for 6 or 8 hours just in the sun, and then we ate it. That's how you fix things there. On our last trip, we were in the deep south, Rupununi region, and this lady sauntered up on her tame cow that she's had since it was born, and she made a saddle for it out of IT palm leaves. You take the leaves and you strip them into about 1/4 inches and make baskets and stuff out of it, but she made a saddle and then put straw and things in it for a little bit of padding. So she was talking about a curlic. The older people there that are maybe 50s and 60s, 70 years old, English is their second language. Their tribal language is their first language, and so sometimes there's a little bit of a communication problem there with certain words. And she was talking about a curlic, and I didn't know what that meant. Well, it turns out she had this chicken, and she just pulled it right out of her shirt, this nearly grown chicken. And so it's just different. You see different things down there than what you're used to here. I doubt if anybody's pulled up on a cow and pulled the chicken out of their shirt here. And on the right, that's just a hollow tree that's a chicken coop. This is farming the way they do it. The village, they usually have structures like you've seen there, houses to live in. And then they'll walk 1 to 5 miles outside of town. And that's where their farm is. And so they may have another little hut out there because they may stay there a day or two. And they grow enough for their families. Traditionally, they have kind of larger families. And some of the preachers will grow things. One grows peanuts, for instance, and sells all the extras that he can to try to get some money. But the farms there don't look like what we're used to with fences and lots of greenery and barns and things like that. This is Brother Elvis. Yes, he was named after Elvis Presley. Even in the deep part of Guyana, Elvis was known. That's his 11 children, and then his mother there on the right. They're aged 21 down to his wife is holding the youngest one. I think she's about 1.5 years old. And they all live at home. Actually, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. I announced when I went down there that our son lives at home. We have 3 children. One of them is living with us. To them, the term live at home means you're living in sin. You're living together with somebody, is how we say it. So when I announced that he was living at home, they were like that. So there's a few phrases that are a little bit different. Anyway, all of them don't live at home. They live with him. And so every day, give us this day our daily bread. We say it, and we don't really mean it that much because we can go anywhere and buy bread. He has to start from scratch every day to feed his family. They don't have, I get emotional. You go and you see and you just think, how do they live? And how do they be happy? They don't have Netflix. How could you possibly be happy? And things like that. So, but they are. He's a good preacher. Of course, his family is about 1/5 of the congregation. They have about 50 members there. So that's good. But they don't have kids. They don't have cupboards and refrigerators and things. You can't just go get macaroni and cheese and fix it in the microwave. They don't have that. If you have money, here's some places that you can buy things. The traveling lady up there with the mule, there was some chickens hanging in there. I have no idea how long the chickens had been hanging there. We didn't buy any of that. On the lower right, every so often you'll have people selling things out in front of their house. The upper right is in the front of a house. They live in the back section of it. And in the lower right, that's a really nice store there. That is really top-notch there. Worship can be a little bit different. Do you see that snake? It's a rattlesnake in the upper right. The guy was preaching, and I was sitting in the very front pew, kind of right over here, and there was a big doorway. And I was watching him, and my neck got kind of sore, and so I just turned around this way, and there's a rattlesnake in the doorway. Then I nudged the guy next to me, who was a vaquero, a cowboy in Brazil. And he said, "That's a rattlesnake." And so he got up and got a broom handle. And the guy preaching never knew, that to me, it's like the devil was at the door. I mean, that's the serpent, right? And so he comes in, you can see this broom handle, and he goes, whack, 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 whack. And he was trying to get it out of the building, and then they killed it with a brick. But a couple of minutes later, a little boy, about a 2-year-old boy, walked up right where that snake had been. So who knows what might have happened. But that's something different than what we have to experience. On the lower right, it was a dirt floor, and it was just ant hills, just coming up out of the floor, and a dog sleeping during church services. And on the lower left, that's a New Testament translated into a local language called Makushi. And the fellow that led the closing prayer there did it in his language of Makushi. And not thinking, I just said amen at the end of it. And then I thought, I shouldn't have said amen. I don't know what he said. Maybe I didn't agree with it. But so you got to watch things like that. The children are wonderful. They are so respectful, so well behaved. I think because there's no additives and preservatives and chemicals and all that kind of stuff, that I think part of that's why they act better. They don't have all the issues that some of our children do. And they'll just sit there. You don't have to say, stop, quit hitting him and come back and be quiet. And they don't act up at all. They're wonderful. The whole society really is. One of the things that I like is that in the whole country, they have to wear school uniforms. And each school has different colors and things. But I like that because if someone is a little more poor than somebody else, they all look the same. You can't tell the difference. On the lower left is the preacher's great niece and nephew rode an hour upstream in that boat to go to school. And then in the lower right, they weren't at school yet. They still had to walk a long ways from the river bank to get to school. And they don't have excuses, there about coming to church services or missing school. It's a privilege to get to go. That on the top is called a banab. It's like a gazebo type thing that's made out of all natural materials, and it's their town meeting place. On the lower left, this particular place has a windmill pump that pumps the water up into those storage tanks that you can see, those black tanks, and then gravity feeds it to the houses. So there they actually have running water. It's not hot or cold water, but at least it's running water. And on the lower right, they have a village generator, and they have a little tax that everybody pays for 3 hours each night. They have electricity because it always gets dark about 6:30. So from 6:30 to 9:30, if you need to charge up anything, that's when you do it. I didn't know that, and so the first time that I went to that village after church services, we were looking at the arts and crafts that people had made. This was in St. Cuthbert's Mission, which is sort of the arts and crafts capital of the country. Like where I live, Berea is arts and crafts capital of Kentucky. Anyway, and so, white missionaries show up, and so they think, well, we're going to sell some stuff. So they're showing us all these things, and all of a sudden, it just goes black, and the whole village goes dark. And I thought, what happened? Well, every night at 9:30, they shut the electricity off. And so I like to never found my way back. Somebody had to help me find my way through the bush, I guess, to get back. On a typical campaign, we split up into teams and we go door to door knocking. And in Wapashana, which is the most prominent language of places that we go, for some reason you say tush, 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 which means inside. It's sort of a question. Is there anybody inside? And they thought it was funny when I announced to them in the United States, tush means your bottom, It means something different, and they thought that was kind of funny. So every time I said tush, 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 I just grinned. I couldn't help it. It was We have to pack everything that we'll need for an event or for the campaign, like a stove, and that's gasoline up there in the upper left. And we rent an army truck, and we just pack everything we can think of, including bottled water, because we're not supposed to drink the local water. On the last trip, no one told me that they ran out of bottled water, or almost did. And so this one over here was the local stuff, and this over here was what I was supposed to be drinking. But for 3 days, I drank the local stuff. Fortunately, it was out of that deep well that I showed you earlier, and is about 30 feet down, and so it didn't bother me. But other people collect it off of their roof, and it sits in a barrel, and you're not supposed to drink that. That's Bill with a bunch of eggs. We take gobs of eggs. There's a whole lot more than that. And then see the shotgun shells there around the back of the seat in front of him. That's not something you usually take when you're going to talk to somebody about a Bible study. But over there, I guess you do. Of course, we have preaching and singing every night. And typically, it's about a 2-week campaign. And for 10 days of that, we're in a particular location. And I don't think it shows it there, but we bring our own generators and are able to show PowerPoint and things like that, which is really neat for them, especially after services a couple of nights. We showed Tom and Jerry cartoons and Bugs Bunny cartoons. That was really a treat because they don't even have television where we were at. Of course, we give away Bible study materials and eyeglasses. Now, when I ask the local preachers, we deal with about 28 congregations. And when I ask them, what do you need? It's very refreshing. They don't say stuff like, I need a car or anything like that. They say eyeglasses, Bibles, and Bible class material. They're not greedy at all. And so think about that. Here, you probably go get a checkup once a year or something. And like me, I just buy them at the Dollar Tree, for $1, just some readers. They don't have that. And so if we take, glasses, maybe they've needed a new prescription the last 3 years and haven't been able to see to thread a needle or read the Bible, so we bring them some new glasses. And a $1 pair of glasses or those Bibles there are only $1 can make a huge difference in the impact in the life of a person. We have prayer, of course, and devotionals. We eat together a couple meals a day. There's also ladies' classes, kids' classes. We brought a generator and some lights, so that's a novelty. In this village, there's 600 people, and each night we had 200 of the village worshiping with us. So 1/3. Can you imagine if 1/3 of the Cincinnati area was all worshiping at the Church of Christ one night? That would be wonderful. I love the cooks. They're my favorite people, as you can tell by my size of my belly. And it's wonderful food. It's all fresh. It's just really good stuff. Canned meat on the lower right is real popular there. People here like Vienna sausages. I don't know. It's Spam. I don't like that. Corned beef hash and those kind of things. Over there, they don't have refrigeration, and so canned meat is very popular. Well, let's see. Also, over on the lower left, you can't quite tell, but that guy's using a knife to cut a big slab off of, I think that was pork. So I don't know. We have a couple of health inspectors at our congregation. They probably wouldn't approve of some of the things over there. And another thing is they don't have refrigeration, but they'll just let it sit out overnight. They'll just cover it up with this cloth magically keeps it somehow from spoiling, and the next day they'll eat it. And it's eggs and meat and stuff that you wouldn't think would be okay. And I've eaten it the next day, and it's been okay. So we seek the lost sheep. I took a picture. That's the church building in the background, and there was just a flock of sheep coming by. There, things aren't as fat as in America. The dogs and cats and cattle and horses and pigs and so on, because they don't have as much to eat. We have a truck, Amerindian Missions, which is who we partner with, owns a truck, and we fill it full of people and bring them to church services. That's David Pear there on the right, and he's teaching. Bible classes or Bible studies can happen anywhere. This is just outside of their house. And if we don't go teach these folks, how are they going to hear the word? Who's going to do it if we don't go do it? Some of them hear the gospel for the first time. In the United States, with all the devices that we have, with the internet, with television, I mean, you can hear a lot of wrong interpretations of the Bible, but you also can find the truth if you're looking. You can find the right websites and the right preachers to listen to. Over there, they don't have that. And so they rely on the Bible, and they rely on people to come. Some of them get a Bible for the first time in their life. So don't let these people go to their graves without ever hearing the gospel. That's why we go. And if you'll notice, that particular graveyard, they're built up because during the rainy season there, it washes the graves away. So that's why they built them up off of the ground like that. So what if nobody had come to this area to preach the gospel decades ago? What if nobody made Bibles available to read? Like the Catholic Church, for instance. I was in one of the villages we were in. They said that they weren't allowed to read until a few years ago. And now, not only can they read, they actually sell Bibles. The Catholic priest sells the people Bibles so they can make some money. So what if no one took the time? What if they just had a big tent meeting here and baptized some people, but then they never came back and followed up for teaching and edification? That's what we do in Guyana. What if the true church had never been established and planted in this community? And then what if those first folks had never remained faithful? So for us, we're like second, third, fourth generation Christians. There, many of them are very first generation, and they may be 60 years old when they're baptized. So it's just a different situation there than what we have here. Bible studies, they're any place. It's not necessarily in a formal setting like we may think of. You have a beautiful building here. There, they just have a structure, and there's usually holes in the walls, to allow the air to come through. And you have to shoo out the chickens and stuff sometimes. One day, one of the guys was preaching, and you expect somebody maybe to come forward. Well, a chicken came forward. It just walked right down, and we didn't baptize it, but I couldn't understand what it was saying. But we do baptize people, obviously. In the circle there, in the top middle, I had the privilege of baptizing these two young ladies. They were cousins. And the first one, this was in the Mocha River, and it was kind of rushing. It was kind of flowing pretty hard, and it was a sandy bottom. And so I put her under, and the water's flowing that way, and so her feet came up, off the bottom. And I know it wasn't very long, but it seemed like an eternity before I could finally get her up out of the water. And I thought, I'm going to baptize this girl and send her to heaven at the same time. So the second one, I did it really fast, so she's okay. But sometimes we defer to the locals to be baptized because there is some hint of that, like, well, I was baptized by a white missionary, and they kind of use that as I was baptized with Paul or Apollos, like in those scriptures. So we try to defer to the local folks. So how many would sit here if there was no air conditioning in the middle of the summer, in August when it's 90 degrees? They sit there. A lot of times the pews don't have backs on them or anything like that. That's Ernesto John in the lower right. He built that building. That's the second one he's built because they outgrew the first one, and they're getting ready to outgrow that one, and he's going to build another one. And so basically we provide the materials, and they do all the work, build it themselves. How many of you, if I go over, I apparently got about 6 minutes, I think, until I'm supposed to quit. How many of you would sit for 2, 3, 4 hours and listen to me? Doubt it. There, they will. They're very polite. It's just a wonderful culture. They defer to you. They're not like Americans. If you kind of talk loud, like we do, they is offensive to them because they talk so soft. Sometimes they talk so soft I can't even understand them. But you have to understand, they don't have loud machines and equipment and radio blaring in their ears all the time. So they have terrific hearing. They don't have bad hearing loss like we do in America. Another thing is they, like, you big ugly lug, how you been doing? We'll say stuff like that. They don't do that. That's not something that they do. They will laugh with you if you say something funny, and because they speak English, they get it, but they don't laugh at you. And so I was trying to say something in Wapashana. I would learn, like, what is your name? Napan Pu'u. I thought, I'm going to use this on people. And so, how are you? Kaimin Pugar is what it is. Well, I didn't realize I wasn't saying it quite right. And so this one lady sort of giggled at me, which is very uncharacteristic of them and their society. I said, okay, what did I say? She said, you didn't say, how are you? You said, I want to eat you. And so I'd been saying this to a bunch of little kids, and I can just imagine them going, look at the belly on that guy. He probably ate one of us already. So that's why I don't want to go somewhere that doesn't speak English, because I don't want to have to learn some language and say something wrong like that. At least that was kind of funny. But Bible studies can happen anywhere. It's usually outside. On the upper left is a soccer stadium. Of course, they call it football. Kids are just lovely, and they're so eager to hear the word. Again, growing up here, even if you're in a non-Christian household, you probably know Noah and the ark, because Chris works for the company that has the ark in the Creation Museum. But they love it. They just eat that stuff up because they haven't heard it a lot of times before, and they love the color of the pictures and things. It's just so refreshing to see the enthusiasm like that. Of course, we have ladies' classes when we go as well. Traditionally, even in the States, the ladies tend to be baptized first. Then you can reach the husbands and the rest of the family after that. Assisting the poor, that is not one of our main things, but we do assist where we can. Luckily, one of the great things about there is it's a friendly government. It's not hostile. You don't have to have a visa to go there. You don't have to worry about Muslims and Hindu conflict. They're not starving because food is so easily grown. And if someone doesn't own land, like between your house and the next house or your house and your farm, you just pick it off the tree and eat it. There's plenty of food. And they do have clothes. As you can see, they mostly dress like us. They just don't have near as many clothes as what we have. But the eyeglasses is something that's really good about assisting them. In December, we have the Rupununi Preachers Seminar. Here, you may have a preacher luncheon once a month or something. They do in the Lexington area. And, of course, we have email and phone and all that. There, they don't have that. They're kind of isolated. Even if you only live 12 miles from the next village, it's a long ways to walk 12 miles and to go see somebody. And so it's wonderful for them to get together. We teach the preachers how to preach and to be a preacher and to solve problems, and for the preachers' wives to act like preachers' wives. People worship wherever they can gather. Not everywhere has a building. And so they'll make makeshift places or meet in a house or a lot of times outdoors. When we do build buildings, it shows that there's a permanent fixture in the community. Now, some places, the last place we went, there was only 3 religious organizations in that village. Sometimes there might be 6 or 7. But it's great to have a building. But as you can see, they're not fancy. They're just functional. Guyana Christian University is really just a building with a big library. It was founded by Tom Holland. He raised the money for it. Of course, he just passed away recently, but he served as the only president for the school since it was started. It's in Lethem, which is kind of the hub of the interior. It's a town of about 4,000, and it has an airport, and that's where it is. So, like the Apostle Paul, we go back and continually follow up with these congregations. So, come join us. If you want to go somewhere that speaks English, it's friendly. It takes about a half a day to get there. It's nice weather. I mean, just anything that you can think of about the situation, it's a really good situation. I was at a missionary retreat about 2 weeks ago and listening to some of them, like from India and so on, talk about how difficult it is. The government's making it on people to come there, and they have these rules they'll make up and taxes and things, if not, physical threats even, to teach the word. Here, in Guyana, you can teach it openly. There's no trouble with that whatsoever. You can come join us on a crusade. That's one of the missionary teams that went. It's about half United States folks and half Guyanese people. If you have old Bible class material or VBS material that you're going to get rid of or throw away, give it to us. They'll use it. We'll send it down there. And it's things that they don't have the money to buy, and there's nowhere to buy it if they had the money. So it's something that's very useful. Opportunities to help. You can read the list there. Everything from $7,500 is the most. That's to finish the building on Wakenham Island. Solar panels is something that is interesting to me because a generator costs money, and then you have to have gas to keep working it, and it has moving parts. But a solar panel is a lot better, and that way they can have worship at night and use the building for other things. Sewing machines. If you have old computers or tablets that you're going to upgrade and you don't want the old one anymore, give it to me. I'll send it down there. The Guyana Christian University students, I gave a couple of them those on my last trip. It was loaded with 14,000 pages of information that there's no way I could carry that in books down there, but I could carry it on a flash drive in a tablet. So what can we learn from the mission work? Be content. You know, as Americans, it's like HGTV. My wife watches that. All it does is tell you that your countertops are out of style. You know, you got to make your house bigger, or your throw pillows don't look right or something. Down there, you don't have to worry about that. You need to be thankful for what you have. More possessions like we have in America just means more distractions. Down there, that's why they'll sit and listen to you, because they don't have anything else to do, nowhere else to go. It's more blessed to give than to receive. We need to have more reliance on God like they do than on ourselves. Go teach. Who was that command for? Was it just for the preacher? Or was it just for the people in the first century? Was it just for, I don't know, people from the United States? No, it's for everybody. So you can go teach. It doesn't have to be to Guyana. You've got people you go to school with. You've got friends, family, people that live up the street, and you've got all these connections in your circle. Invite them to church services. I noticed that you all, I don't know if I'm being videoed, am I? I am? Oh man, I would have done a lot better if I'd known that. Anyway, you can refer them to your website and to other things like that. You don't necessarily have to teach yourself, but you can have other people do it, but do be inviting people to church services. All lost souls deserve to hear about Jesus. You know, not just people in the United States. God's timing works best. Down there, they don't get in a rush. They call it Guyana time. And people will show up an hour early for church services or an hour late. You know, they're walking and they don't have watches and things like that. Our neighbor doesn't have to be the person that lives next to us. It can be somebody in another country. They're our neighbor as well. And we need to seek opportunities to help others whenever possible. I'll close with this. There's a bridge outside of Lethem, and it has a bar across it because they don't want big, heavy trucks to cross it, and then it would damage the bridge. So there's a sign on the left that says, caution, the bridge ahead, and the height is 7.5 feet. Well, we went over there to pick up people for church services and bring them back. So we're in the back of the truck, and of course they say, duck, you know, you're going to get your head knocked off. Well, there's an urgency there. You know, if that was going to be, if you were in a truck and somebody had their head sticking up, you would say, if they were your enemy, if they were a friend, if there's somebody you didn't even know, you'd say, duck, you're going to get your head hit. Well, we need to have that sense of urgency about other people and their souls. We need to tell them that the situation that they're in is not according to the Bible, and we need to have that urgency. On the lower right, at night, we had the headlights on, but there was a motorcyclist. See, it was a British colony, so they drive on the left, okay? So he's on the left side of the road thinking that another motorcycle was coming on the other left side of the bridge. It was a car with one headlight out, and he died. He didn't know that he was going to die at that moment or that time. So we need to have a sense of urgency about telling people about the gospel and about their soul and their condition. And then for us, I've talked about baptism, hear, believe, repent, confess, be baptized, live faithfully. You probably have heard that a lot already, so you know that. But I'm saying, look inside yourself. Have a sense of urgency about yourself and your life. And if there's anything that you need to change, or if you have not been baptized, you have one somewhere, right? The baptistry? Oh, behind the screen, okay. Well, it doesn't have to be in a river. You won't have to almost drown while somebody's baptizing you. I'm sure that's warm, and there's no fish or bugs or anything in it. Okay, no caiman are in there, right? There is a caiman? Oh, woo. So if you need to be baptized, there's no better time than tonight, okay, right in front of these folks. Or if you're shy about it, we can all leave, and you can just be with your family and be baptized. But that's the best decision you can make. If you've already been baptized and you have sin in your life and things that you need to handle differently, then we love you. I don't know all of you, but I love you, just like I love the folks in Guyana. And I want you to be right with the God. So if you have a need, come forward as we sing the invitation song, and we'll give you a big hug and pray with you.